My name is Cassandra King, and I am a recovering nursing home administrator. So the nightmares never stop. They do get fewer and far between, but the experience of that is still within me, and it's obviously not something I'm choosing to do anymore, or I would be reporting for duty in a monkey suit tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to have a department head meeting, talk about everything that happened over the weekend, although I probably got called at 3 o'clock in the morning and was told. What I'm here to talk about today is a new way to create the experience of aging, and particularly the experience of having Alzheimer's disease. A friend of mine posted on Facebook recently in regard to some other things that are happening in the world right now. She wrote, "We will no longer stand for what was once tolerated and assumed. The status quo is no longer anyone's fallback. We are now required to step it up, all of us." Thank you, Alexandria Moffat. And I read that and I thought, that's how it is with Alzheimer's disease. The status quo is no longer acceptable. It's not acceptable to me as a person in management, as a consultant, as a personal assistant to people who have that condition. And what is required in order to have a transformation is a large group of people coming on board willing to have a shift in the perception of what's actually going on with somebody who has what is called Alzheimer's. Now, people hear the word Alzheimer's and they shrink and they turn away and they say, "I don't want to talk about that." Many people have that response. Well, I'm here to tell you that Lois Alzheimer was a doctor who did an autopsy, and he saw the brain of someone who had Alzheimer's, and that's why it's named Alzheimer's. And so here's this man who did this wonderful, had this wonderful discovery, and his name is Mud because of what we associate with Alzheimer's. I love people who have Alzheimer's disease. I think it's a blast most of the time. So if you came here today wanting to hear about the cure or how to prevent it or what you're, whether you're going to get it and is it genetic and all of that, that's not what my talk is about today. There's a lot of information on the internet, and you can find all of those theories and all those philosophies and the way outdated thing about aluminum in the brain. You can find all of that on the internet. What I'm here to do today, my intention is not to give you information and facts like a report that you can go home and say, "Oh, here's what I learned today." What I want to do today is have a discussion that's a discovery type of discussion that will have you left with the experience of a shift. And in order for that to happen, what I'm going to ask you to do, my request, is that all those past experiences or perhaps current experiences that you are having with Alzheimer's disease or some type of cognitive impairment, that you put that aside. And couldn't have asked for a better meditation where the discussion, where the little talk was that our minds are always going. We have an internal dialogue, a committee that's always saying, "Yeah, but she doesn't know about my experience with my mother. So, that's ridiculous what she's proposing." I'm asking you to put all of that aside and just start from right now, today. Because if there's something in the space, a negative experience that you've had with a parent or a spouse or a sibling or a neighbor or your best friend whoever that person was. And if that's what's in the space today, then it's going to get in the way of considering that there's a different approach, and that this is about point of view, and this is about how we as Lakeside people here are already doing life differently. I mean, you've shown that because you came here, you moved here from wherever you moved. Some people here are local people that are Mexican nationals. Most here at this talk are from somewhere else. So you've already shown that you're willing to be a pioneer and go do something differently somewhere. That's what I'm asking of the community. My request is that we start looking at cognitive impairment as a part of life, a natural part of life, rather than a horrible sentence, a prison sentence. Things I hear people say about Alzheimer's disease are really hard for me to hear, because I have learned so much from people who have Alzheimer's disease, and some of my best and funnest moments of my entire life have been in the company with people who have Alzheimer's disease. And why it happens that way for me, why it occurs for me that way, is because I see them exactly as they are in the moment. I have no point of reference to say, well, yeah, but she used to be able to this. And look at her now. Well, all I see is her now. When I go into a care community or I go to somebody's home, and all I see is that person exactly as they are right now. And so all I have is a space for them to be that way. And in that, what we have is a lovely experience. Most of the time. Okay, I'm not going to say that it's always fun, because no one is always fun. It doesn't matter, whatever it is, especially teenagers. And look, they don't have Alzheimer's and cognitive impairment, and that's the least fun I ever had, was in those relationships. Sorry, my sons. I love you. They're going to see this talk. They know I love them. Okay, so can you agree to put what you think you know about Alzheimer's disease, can you agree to put that aside? And if you can't, that's okay. You'll get more out of this if you're able to do that. The statistics are that 50% of people over the age of 80 do have Alzheimer's disease in any country in the world. So, I don't know how many people here are over the age of 80, but half of you got it. So what you going to do about that? This talk is about taking responsibility. And some people don't like that idea, because it's easier, or maybe not easier, but we are accustomed to being a victim of dis-ease processes. So I say dis-ease. The word disease actually is dis-ease. So a dis-ease makes us uncomfortable, right? No matter what it is. So I have a son who's 30 years old who has schizophrenia. And he was diagnosed at the age of 21. And so his life doesn't look the way we thought it was going to look. When he was that shining star magna cum laude graduate from high school, got into UCSD, double major honor roll student, and boom, junior year, it hits, this genetic inheritance. So it's taken a lot of work for me to say he is where he is. And this is his new normal. And how he occurs in the world is okay, although it doesn't fit what I thought it was going to be, or what everyone else in the family thought it was going to be. He's a beautiful person. He's causing no one any harm, and he does what he does to contribute in the community that he lives in. And he makes a huge contribution by setting up coffee and doing special events at the Unity Church in the small town where he lives. So taking responsibility for a dis-ease, he has done that. I take responsibility for my disease of adrenal fatigue, adrenal insufficiency, and a genetic lack of ability to store vitamin B12, which I didn't know about, but now it explains a lot in my life, that I've got to take my B12 every day, and I've got to watch my level of activity and look at stressors in my life, and that's what I mean by taking responsibility. Taking responsibility means there's no blame and there's no saying this is wrong or this isn't fair or this shouldn't be happening to me. Look what I did. I did everything. I exercised. I did the diet and here I have Alzheimer's. It's not right. That's not taking responsibility. That's blaming. So what we want... what I came here for is to look at the possibility of what we can do differently here, because it is here. I see it all over this town. Okay, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a nurse. I don't have a clinical education. I've sat through lots of meetings talking about clinical conditions. My education, first of all, is in public speaking. And then I have a certification in long-term care administration, and I have a license to run assisted living facilities in the state of California. So I am not clinical, and when I say I see Alzheimer's, it's that I've been around thousands of people who have Alzheimer's, and there are certain characteristics that are very clear to me right away. I will answer a question, because this is the biggest question I get, and it might be one that you want to ask at the end, because I get asked this on airplanes and at grocery stores and everywhere. I forgot to wear my name tag today that says who I am. Who I am, that's the next topic. But here, the question I get is Alzheimer's the same as dementia? No. Dementia is a word that describes characteristics. It describes signs and symptoms. Dementia is not a medical diagnosis. There is no ICD-9 code for it in the United States that we can bill for in a nursing home. We have to have dementia due to what? What's causing those signs and symptoms? The majority of cases of the D word is Alzheimer's, over 50% of it. And then we have the D word due to cerebral vascular accidents, which are stroke, commonly called stroke. That's second most common. And the third most common is Parkinsonian dementia, Lewy body dementia. Okay, now why do I call it the D word? Because the word dementia means to be out of one's mind. And I really don't like that. I don't like talking about my friends that way. And I don't know when it got popular. It got popular in the late 80s. But when I was growing up, we told stories about the serial killer who broke out of jail, who might be hiding under your bed at night. Did you guys ever tell those stories? Or they're hiding in the woods and he's demented. Okay, I get it in that context. I don't get it in the context of somebody who has a brain disease. So I call it the D word, and I'm going to be saying cognitive impairment and cognitive syndrome, which are longer. I just don't want to say the D word. It's a bad word to me. Rementia is what I train on, and Rementia is what I would love to create with the community here in Lakeside. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we do that by having a shift in what we think it is to have Alzheimer's and how we think life is going to be once we have that diagnosis. And in the opening, too, there was a reference to what I took to mean like linear thinking, or a concept in that way. We have a person who's got life behind them and past experience and career and family and accomplishments and trips. And then we have where the person is right now. And say at this point they go to the doctor and they get the mini mental exam done, or they have an MRI, which actually doesn't show Alzheimer's. You have to have a PET scan. And they say, the doctor says, it looks like you've got cognitive syndrome. Then in this linear way of thinking about life, what we do is project that means the future is going to be bad. Oh no, did you hear about Joe? Yeah, he went to the doctor and he was told that he's probably got Alzheimer's, and I don't know, poor Mary. What is she going to do? What are they going to do? I don't know. Maybe they'll go back to the States, or maybe they'll hire a caregiver. But if he keeps waking up at 3 a.m. and trying to leave the house, I mean, Mary, how long can that hold out, you know? What are they going to... I know it's just terrible. God, that's awful. I hate to hear that. No, I'll give him a call next week. So that's an old point of view, and that's a very popular point of view. And what I'd like to hear are conversations like, oh, did you hear about Joe? Yeah, you know, we were talking about that last year, and everybody had a little group, and we came up with some guidelines about when certain things start happening, that here's the action that will be taken. So now that the doctors confirmed that's what's happening, you know, we're going to sit down with Mary and Joe, and we're going to say, well, here's what you said the options were. So where are you at with your resources, and what are you thinking? What would you like to do? And what's the possibility you're going to create for the rest of your life? That's a very different conversation, isn't it? That's the kind of conversation that I have with people. And there's a window of opportunity to have that conversation that is in the early stages. And somewhere in the middle stages of Alzheimer's, that window closes. And then we have a situation where someone's in denial, and they're making statements like, I'm fine, I don't need any help. The electric company made a mistake, that's why my utilities got cut off. My son-in-law stole my money, that's why I don't have any money in the bank. And they start blaming and making excuses when really it's because they weren't willing to surrender earlier and hand over some of the responsibilities of life so that it would be manageable once the Alzheimer's is there. So the way to do this differently is to start the conversation now. It's to have it early. It's to not do the ostrich in the sand. It's to not say, oh, well, maybe it's just going to stop right here. Alzheimer's is a progressive illness. It is a fatal illness. It does not stop right there. And we want to look at this as something that comes in phases, and throughout the progression, always see somebody as a whole person. See, when we're doing that linear thinking and we're going, oh, had this, now is here, ugh. We are not looking at all of these other points of view of this person. So long-term memory stays intact, right? If you've been around somebody with Alzheimer's, they start talking about childhood or very early adulthood. Well, there's this point of view. Okay, this is the past you heard about and you know about, but there's this past too that they never told you about. And there's this past too that they were afraid to talk about. And there's this past that has to do with your heritage and your family culture that they didn't have time to talk about while they were raising you or while you were developing your careers and dealing with all that other stuff. So, you know, there's this point of view of Alzheimer's from the side. And then there's in the future. Wow, okay, Mr. Sorensen used to come to my office and sing, I'm forever blowing bubbles, pretty bubbles in the sky. You know that song? They fly so high, nearly touch the sky, and then they up and die. Fortune's always hiding, I've looked everywhere. I'm forever blowing bubbles, pretty bubbles in the air. He would come to my office and sing. He was 94 years old. Boy, was he a flirt, too. I bought him a bumblebee costume for his pollinating for Halloween. And his son was talking to me one day, and I said, I love the way your dad comes and sings in my office. It just brightens my day. And he says, my dad doesn't sing. You're talking about someone else. I said, no, I'm talking about your dad. He comes to my office and says, I've never heard my dad sing. Okay. Well, now he sings. And he's a flirt. And he rolls around and he's flirting with every woman. No, that's not my dad. My dad's really reserved. He's very conservative. He didn't even marry till he was 60. That's why we're so young, And I'm like, no, it's your dad. I'm telling you. He's having a great time out there. Okay, there's this whole other aspect of him that came out with the Alzheimer's, with the cognitive impairment. And when we are stuck in, but I want him to be the way he used to be. I want my mom to know who I am. I want her to know my name. She thinks I'm her sister. Wow, isn't that great that she thinks you're her sister? That means she thinks you have this relationship with her where you're equals now. And it's not a parental relationship. That opens up a whole new world of possibility for how you can communicate. So there's point of view and this shifting and this aliveness that can and does happen when we, the observers, are not keeping someone in a context that doesn't work anymore. When we want someone to be how they used to be, and that part of the brain is where damage is occurred, and so these memories aren't getting through, and there's a whole talk about why that is. I don't have time to get into that, but when we keep people in our concept of who they are, and that's who we want them to be, that's actually putting them into a state of dementia, and that can promote the decline of a human being who's experiencing change of the brain. It's a disease of the brain. So, I've seen it over and over again where the family members, the friends, the people around are the ones that have the problem with it. When someone is allowed to be just exactly how they are in that moment, there is no problem. How we create that experience for us here in Lakeside is that we open up the conversation, though. If we keep doing what we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years, it was called organic brain syndrome. Some of you may remember that from the 70s. Before that, it was called senility. And everyone said, oh, that's just a normal part of aging. No, it's not. It happens to 50% of people over the age of 80. And as people live longer, longevity, people say, why are we getting more Alzheimer's? I don't know that we're getting more Alzheimer's, but I know that people are living longer. We're also having more pacemakers, and we're also having more cancer, and we're also having more of this and that as, life expectancy increases. So call it whatever you want to call it, but when we don't talk about it and we stay in denial about it, we don't create new possibilities for how the future can be. So, I'm looking for a brave group of people. And I don't even need to be involved in this. You can do it. You can go out and in small groups, people you trust, start the conversation. Stop covering up. Stop doing I know I really shouldn't be driving anymore, but dang, I don't want to give up my independence. Okay, that's just going to get you down the same road, the same path that your mom or your dad or whoever it was you had this experience with. Don't wait for the crisis to happen. Be proactive. Be brave. Own it. Take it. take the bull by the horns and say, this is the probability. So what am I going to do with this? Yeah, it's not easy for me to think of my son, that this is something that we will be managing, that he will be managing for the rest of his life. It is what it is, and it is not any other way. And when I get into, yeah, but I want him to be the way and I wish that, and then maybe a miracle cure will come, and that does not contribute to who he is right now. That is wanting him to be something other than who he is. And there's no power in that. So do you want to have a powerful experience with this? Then that means we start talking about it. What can we do? What can we create differently here? There's a lot that's missing here in Lakeside. I got here and I said, where's the Alzheimer's caregiver support group? It's obvious to me after 2 days, there's got to be a lot of Alzheimer's caregivers in this town. And, there isn't one. Well, there's a couple that are, not necessarily labeled that way, but they're caregiver support group meetings. Okay, so I'm talking about specifically for people with cognitive impairment. Or how about a support group for the people who have cognitive impairment, where they get together and say, this just really bites this week, that I didn't remember my grandson's birthday, and now, I know, yeah, I get it. Support groups are there for all kinds of conditions in life. We could have one for people who have early stage Alzheimer's. We can have co-ops. We can go back to the commune concept. There's some movements going on with intentional housing, so that's one thing, right, that's happening in town. It's getting back to living in groups of people rather than living just 2 in a pod in this house and 2 in a pod in this house and 2 in a pod over here and 1 here and 1 here and 1 here, and coming together. We are human beings, village people. I mean, it works in a village. So this can work. First, start having the conversation. Secondly, identify where is it happening, who's going to need the support, and how are we going to come together as a community to provide that support. What everyone wants is to age at home, age and place. They say, I don't want to go to one of those places. Okay. Well, let's put some systems in place so that we can promote that happening as long as possible. One of those is that we need caregiver respite programs. We need places for people who have the Alzheimer's to go hang out with each other. It can be powerful. It can be recreational. It can be rementia, and healthy for both. Well, we don't have anything like that right now in Lakeside. So what we need is some generosity. We need some land. We need some properties. We need people to step up and say, here's what I've got. Here's what I can bring to the table. And what do you have? And how can we combine our resources so that we create camps, retreats, how about rotating in a house? Like, say there are 5 couples, and in these 5 couples, one person has the diagnosis. Okay, so you rotate Monday through Friday. Mondays I host. Everyone comes to my house, the people with cognitive impairment. I hire a caregiver. We have lunch. All the other caregivers get a break. Tuesday I host at my house. Now everyone comes to mine. That's 4 days a week that the caregiver gets a break. And it doesn't cost anybody anything. So there are ways that you can get together and start saying, yeah, it's time. Let's start formulating some solutions. There's modifications that need to be made. I think we've all noticed that. around Ajijic for walkability, for workability, forming an alliance that represents the people. A fellow running for mayor came into the clinic. I was with my client last week, and one of the guys running for mayor, I try to get away from politics and just seems to follow me. Here he comes. And I say to him, what are you going to do for the elderly population if you get elected? That's my concern. What are you going to do about these streets where people get hurt and they can't walk and, we're going to do ramps. Well, are you going to do ramps like this at a 45-degree angle? Are you going to do ramps at the 1:12 ratio that's American with Disabilities Act standards? Because those are the kind of ramps that work. So alliances with the local government to say, what can we do around this town to make it safer? What can you do around your house? What modifications need to be made in your home? Do you have grab bars in your shower? Do you have grab bars by your bed? Do you have grab bars outside of the shower? Do you have them next to your favorite recliner where you get up when you're having a harder and harder time? Do you have a recliner that's going like this? You might want to consider getting one that doesn't do that. If you're having a hard time standing up straight, boom. There's all kinds of things you can do around your house. Do you have unstable furniture that you're relying on when you're losing your balance? Okay, so home modifications, environmental modifications. These are real things, real changes that you can make. And the biggest thing is allowing other people to do for you what is becoming a risk. And we all have this ego. We all have ego, right? And we all have, I don't need anybody else. Well, I'm strong. Well, I don't want to have to rely on anybody else. Why? Where does that come from? That's old stuff. That's old tapes playing. That comes from, 5 years and on. And you should be able to do this. You go out in the world and you prove you can make it. Okay, you've already done that. You don't need to keep doing that. I'm ready to get already. I'm 52. I'm ready to go. Okay, been there, done that. Okay, so can someone else come clean my house? Would someone else manage my money, please? I'm over it. Okay, but my generation's a little different. So I have members here from the greatest generation, and then we have members in the audience from the baby boomer generation, and there are some real differences there, but everyone still wants to appear strong. We want to put on a show for the rest of the world. I don't need you. I'm fine. I'm not ready yet. Okay. Wait for the crisis then. You know what happens when the crisis happens? You don't get a choice. It's very disempowering to fall and break your hip and not have a choice. And I've seen it happen hundreds of times. So the way to have new choices, new possibilities for new agers is to make some choices now. Take it on. Be responsible. Have an accountability partner in your life. Maybe you have a spouse, and that's great. Both spouses may have signs and symptoms of cognitive impairment. In that case, which adult child can you trust? Who's there in your life? Who's on your team? Time to bring them in. It's time to say, hey, here's where my important papers are. Hey, I need to put you as a signer on my account in case something happens to me. It's time. That's how we take responsibility, and we end up having a powerful experience of life where it's like, yes, I chose this place. Like my client Larry, he was willing. He said, I can't handle all this mail anymore. It was, boy. Okay, we looked at 3 places with his daughter. He chose the place. He lived out his last 3 lives happily, surrounded by people, having society, having 3 meals a day, having entertainment. He was so happy. Very different experience than an experience I had here recently with a client who stayed in denial for too long, and the window closed. And by the time her daughter contacted me, okay, don't have time to talk about all that, but what it is this woman was not safe at home. She didn't make choices 2 or 3 years ago when she could have. So when I found the right place for her and we walked in for dinner and the family drove away, and she tried to go after the car with her cane, and I walked along with her, and I held the space for her to react exactly how she needed to react. And that's not an easy place to be with somebody, and it's what I do. So she cried, she yelled, she cussed. She said, "I can't believe they left me here." She had a panic attack. She couldn't breathe. And then she looked at me and she said, "You did a real good job setting this up, didn't you?" And I said, "I did the best I could for you." And that's the truth. Because the best was not for her to stay at home alone anymore. Disempowerment. No choice. That creates resentment. That creates a huge story that just confirms everything she believed since she was 5 years old, hiding from Nazi Germany and Sweden. Okay? Wonderful story she has. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. However, choosing earlier would have her in the position of, I took responsibility for what happened with me medically, and this is what I chose. Is it ideal? No. Is it really what I wanted to do when I was 80? No. Okay, this is what happened. So, new choices for new agers. One more thing. So we have many people who practice meditation and practice surrendering of the self. Correct? Like the goal of Buddhism and certain spiritual things are to let the self disappear. Well, guess what happens in the late stages of Alzheimer's? Self. Present. Moment by moment by moment. I see that as beautiful and free.